When it comes to Scrum, Scrum works in complex domains where knowledge and practice is emergent. An important takeaway at this point in the video is that Scrum doesn't apply and should not be applied to every instance of product delivery. In fact, there are many cases where trying to use Scrum will actually make it harder for you to deliver your product. So what I'm going to do now is talk to you about when Scrum should not be used and when it should be used. Note that the Scrum Guide itself describes Scrum as a lightweight framework that helps people, teams, and organizations generate value through adaptive solutions to complex problems. So what we're going to question now is, what is a complex problem? This idea of complexity is a loaded term. Many people could tell you what the word complex means. It means tough, it means challenging. But what does complex mean when we consider product delivery and in particular the Scrum Framework? A good place to look for this information is the Kinetic Framework. It's a framework created by a guy called Dave Snowden, and the idea is that there are 4 domains called simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic. These domains are defined by their cause and effect relationships. For example, in the simple domain, whenever you put in a certain input or cause, you will get the same effect at the end of it. The chaotic domain, which is at the other end of the Kinetic spectrum, is where the cause and effect is impossible to determine or predict. Now, the complicated domain is where more is known than unknown if you consider information and knowledge. In the complicated domain, we are able to make good forecasts about what will happen if a certain cause occurs. The final domain is called the complex domain, which is where Scrum as an empirical process resides. It's where more is unknown than known about the situation. When it comes to complexity, what you need to do in the situation is to gather some evidence, sense or interpret the evidence that you've gathered, and then respond to it. The complex domain in Kinetic is associated with 3 words: probe, sense, and respond. I want you to try an activity now. I've just mentioned the 4 domains when it comes to Kinetic, and I want you to come up with your own example for each of these 4 domains. You're probably going to find it easier to consider real-world events in order to do this. It's really hard, so take as long as you need. Pause the video and create examples for something for the simple domain, where if you do one thing, you know exactly what's going to happen by doing it. Think of another example for a complicated domain, where you don't know everything, but you are able to make a best forecast about what might happen if you do a certain activity. Then, think of an example for complexity, where there is a need to probe, sense, and respond, where more is unknown than known, but you are able to make steps forward. And finally, think of an example for the chaotic domain, where a cause may occur, but you won't know anything about the effect that it will have. Pause the video now. So here are the examples I use. When talking about the simple domain, I use baking as an example. When I follow a recipe, I know exactly what I'm going to get at the end. The cause and effect is clear, simple, and understood. When it comes to complicated, the example I use is playing chess. There are good practices for playing chess, and you likely know the rules and have the knowledge about the game. For me, the next domain, complexity, is like playing poker. You can look at your own cards until you're blue in the face, but all that's going to tell you is that you do not have the same cards that your opponents have. So what you need to do in that case is probe, create a safe-to-fail experiment that you can find out the outcome, sense, and then make an approach or an action of your response based on that outcome. And finally, chaos. Chaos happens because there is no clear relationship between the cause and effect. It's commonly associated with crisis. The takeaway from this video is that Scrum thrives on complexity. A Scrum team's skills and knowledge may create some transparency, but fundamentally they will need the experiment that they create and do. Once they've done that, they iterate on them incrementally.